fighting one another, because if they're fighting each other, they're not fighting the Philistines. And so that makes it easier for the Philistines to consolidate power. But what do we see here? Here we have, they basically proposed what we would call a battle of champions. They said, well, we'll get 12 guys on your side, we'll get 12 guys on the other side, and we'll have a big fight and see who wins. And so here they have this. Effectively, this would be something probably akin to some kind of a gladiator type battle, where these men are fighting each other, quite possibly to the death. When it talks about here that so that they fell down together, there is some suggestion that these 24 men ended up killing each other in this fight of champions. And given that the battle then is therefore inconclusive, since all 24 of these guys are dead, that then now a major fight breaks out. Here you've got Joab and his army on one side, you've got Abner and his troops on the other side. They're having this major battle back and forth. They're at this place near Gibeon. And so here, and it talks about here in chapter 18, it says, now the three sons of Zeruiah were there, Joab and Abishai and Ashiel. And Ashiel was as swift-footed as one of the gazelles which is in the field. Now, Zeruiah is David's sister. So these men, Joab and Abishai and Ashiel, they're all three David's nephews. And they all hold important positions in David's army. And so they have that relationship to him. Verse 19, then Asahel pursued Abner and did not turn to the right or to the left from following Abner. Then Abner looked behind him and said, is that you, Asahel? And he said, it is I. So Abner said to him, turn to your right or to your left and take hold of one of the young men for yourself and take for yourself his spoil. But Asahel was not willing to turn aside from following him. So Asahel has got his sights set on Abner. He's going to pursue Abner. He's going to take Abner down. Perhaps he understands that Abner is the driving force in this civil war between these two groups, and he can gain perhaps some recognition from David if he can take Abner out of the battle. Josephus writes, perhaps a little bit of hyperbole, I don't know, but he writes that Asahel could run as fast as a horse. He could outrun a horse. He was that swift-footed. Really? Yeah. Okay. Okay. I did not know that. What about the Pony Express guys? They went for hundreds of miles.
And they weren't always down.
All right. Well, I assume they were moving at a pretty good clip. All right. Well, there's an interesting point of view. But yeah, here's Asahel. He's apparently very quick-footed, very swift, and he's determined he's going to run down Abner. Abner, of course, sees him coming, and he wants to avoid a feud. He understands that if I kill this guy, this is Joab's brother, and if I kill him, then I'm going to have to deal with Joab. And so we see what happens. He said he's even talking to him as they're running, saying, no, don't you come after me. Go after somebody else and take that spoil, but don't come after me. Abner wants to avoid this conflict. Well, Asahel won't listen to him. In verse 23, or verse 22, then Abner repeated again to Asahel, turn aside from following me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How then can I lift up my face to your brother Joab? This is exactly what he's wanting to avoid. I do not want to get into a personal fight, a vengeance fight with your brother. So leave me alone. I don't want to get into this with your brother. Well, Asahel won't, And so, however, he refused, verse 23, he refused to turn aside. Therefore, Abner struck him in the belly with the butt end of the spear, so that the spear came out his back, and he fell there and died on that spot. And it came about that all who came to that place where Asahel had fallen and died stood still. So here, Abner, in what is effect in self-defense, strikes at Asahel with the butt end of the spear, and it's, with enough force that it runs him through with the butt end of it. That just sounds painful to think about, and kills him. And you can imagine that those soldiers that are also pursuing or in the vicinity with Asahel, they see this effectively one of the leaders of their army has fallen, and that can be pretty demoralizing when one of your commanders is slain in battle. It kind of demoralizes the army. So everybody's just kind of standing there looking at it and realizing that, hey, we just lost one of our commanders. It says, but now verse 24, but Joab and Asahel and Abishai pursued Abner, and when the sun was going down, they came to the hill Ammah, which is in front of Giah in the way of the wilderness of Gibeon. And the sons of Benjamin gathered together behind Abner and became one band, and they stood on top of a certain hill. So here, Abner is able to finally rally his forces together. What would typically happen in these fights is that there would be these fighting groups going back and forth with each other, and the main purpose, the main objective in a fight like this was you wanted to get the enemy to break, because if they broke and run, you had them. And that's what's happened here. That's what's happened here with Abner and his army. They've broken and ran. And what we'll find out, of course, is that it ends up being a fairly lopsided victory for David's army, because the other troops broke and ran. And so, but Abner now has managed to outrun enough so that he's got his troops now to some degree able to kind of reassemble, reorganize, and now they've rallied on this hilltop. So they've got the high ground, they've got a little more compact body, and so they're able to make a stand here. Verse 26, then Abner called to Joab and said, shall the sword devour forever? Do you not know that it will be bitter in the end? How long will you refrain from telling the people to turn back from following their brothers? Abner wants this, he wants a truce. Effectively, we need, let's stop the fighting. We've had enough fighting, let's stop the fighting. He's also pointing out, I've got a consolidated position, and if you keep coming, it's going to be bad probably for both of us. There's going to be a lot more people get killed if this keeps going on. And that's likely the truth. They've got it. They're sort of, especially if they're on a hilltop, they've got the tactical advantage of having the high ground. And if they've got the high ground, then they've got an opportunity to do some real damage to David's men. So Abner's calling for a truce. Joab, however, verse 27, Joab says, as God lives, if you had not spoken, surely the people would have gone away in the morning, each from following his brother. So here is Joab, who is rightly blaming them. You started this. That's really Joab's answer. You started this. And if you hadn't said anything, none of this fighting would be taking place. So it's really, you're the one that's kind of got this ball rolling. So Joab blows the trumpet, verse 28, Joab blew the trumpet, and all the people halted and pursued Israel no longer, nor did they continue to fight anymore. Abner and his men then went through the Arabah all that night. So they crossed the Jordan, walked all morning, and came to Mahanaim. So here is Joab, okay, he agrees to the truth. He blows the trumpet. The trumpet is a recall signal to his troops. They all gather back together. The fight is over for the moment. Abner naturally wants to put as much distance as he can between himself and the armies of Joab because he knows he can't fight them effectively. And so he force marches them all night until they can cross over the Jordan and get back to Maham. Yeah. Right. That's true. That's a good point. Yeah, some there's been some speculation about what was the purpose of that battle of the champions, those 24 men fighting each other. What was the purpose? And some commentators there again, as with most things, you get sort of two schools of thought there. One group suggesting that here is Abner being extraordinarily cruel, extraordinarily brutal, and suggesting, hey, let's have a gladiator fight to amuse us. And so they're going to have this gladiator fight to go back and forth just for the amusement of the troops. Others have suggested, just as you suggested, that perhaps Abner was doing this in the hopes that this fight, a fight like that, might quickly resolve who's going to be in charge, who's going to win, and either he would be in charge or Joab, and they could reach some sort of a settlement based on this battle of champions, and therefore avoid a lot of bloodshed, as you point out, avoid a lot of bloodshed because, hey, this has kind of been resolved with this battle of champions. Unfortunately, the battle or this fight between these champions was inconclusive. Nobody won, and so the thing starts to escalate pretty quickly. And given the text that we have here, it seems fairly clear that Abner doesn't want this escalating. He sees it as, he may have had some very selfish reasons for not wanting it to escalate, because again, we'll find out that he has been, or at least there is some suggestion that with the problem he's got with the Philistines, he does not need also a fight with David and David's troops, and so because of that, he may be trying to mitigate the damage to some degree. Anyway, he takes his men. They quickly force march, like I said, back out of this area, back across the Jordan, back into Maham, so that he can get away for a while, putting that maximum distance between Joab. As it says here, it says, then Joab returned from following Abner. When he had gathered all the people together, 19 of David's servants, besides Ahaziel, were missing. But the servants of David had struck down many of Benjamin and Abner's men, so that 360 men died. So they took up Ahaziel and buried him in his father's tomb, which is in Bethlehem. Then Joab and his men went all night until the day dawned at Hebron. Yeah. Yes. No, I didn't realize that. Yeah. 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 It would have pierced. Pretty well all the way through it. Yeah.
Read the Iliad.
Yeah.
This is a very typical Iliad scene. All the spear goes over.
Yeah.
They didn't just have shove hard.
Yeah, they were to strike hard.
Yes.
Yes. So we find out Job's lost 20 men, including his brother, but Abner's lost 360. And again, this would have been fairly, this kind of lopsided result was fairly typical when you broke the enemy. When you got the enemy running, why it was much easier to strike them down and hit them from behind and strike them down that way than if they were facing you face to face with a sword and probably a shield, and were able to better defend themselves. And so we see what happens. We end up with these. Again, this was very typical of the ancient battles, that once you broke the enemy line, once you broke the enemy's formations, they began to run, scatter. Why then it was pretty easy to run them down and kill them. And so we see this very lopsided victory here between these two forces. Joab then, he takes his brother, takes him back to Bethlehem. They bury him fairly quickly. And then Joab goes on a forced march, determined to pursue after Abner and tries to close the distance between them. All right. Any question or comment on chapter 2? All right, we go in then from there to chapter 3, and we begin here with this section here that describes how the growth of David's house. It says, now there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David, and David grew steadily stronger, but the house of Saul grew weaker continually. Sons were born to David at Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon by Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and the second Chileab by Abigail, the son of Nabal the Carmelite, and the third Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmi, king of Geshur, and the fourth Adonijah, the son of Haggith, and the fifth Shaphathiah, the son of Abital, and the sixth Ithream by David's wife Eglah. These were born to David at Hebron. And so what we find here is that, again, we see this shift of power from Saul's house to David's house. This was prophesied. Samuel had said back over in Samuel 15, 1 Samuel 15 and verse 28, he had said, so Samuel had said to him, the Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today and has given it to your neighbor who is better than you. And so we see that prophecy is being fulfilled. The kingdom's been torn away from the house of Saul and is being given to David. So it's fulfilling that prophecy. The Israelite civil war continues on, as it says here, that there was a long war. Well, there is a long war, but there's not too many in the way of battles that we have. We have very, very little information about battles. It just appears that there's this long period of hostility. Commentators suggest that what's happening here is that Abner is having to deal with, Abner wants to be king. That's pretty clear. Abner wants to be king, or at least he wants to be, the ruler behind the king, if we think of him that way. But he's too busy fighting against the Philistines and their incursions, that he has no time really to deal with David. There's no time to go to war with David because he's constantly having to defend against the Philistines. David, we see here, his household is growing. He now has 6 wives. He had gone into Hebron. I think it was recorded when he had gone into Hebron, he'd gone in there with 3 wives. Now he's got 6. So in that period of time, he gains 3 more wives. And we will find out as we, of course, if you study the ongoing history of David, as we do study the ongoing history, we will see how that polygamy is the ruin of his family. He apparently is marrying, not because he's in love with these women, but because he can gain some financial or political advantage through these marriages. And so he's taking on these wives, now up to 6, and having children by them, as we see here. Verse 5, it talks about his wife Eglah, and she is specifically mentioned as David's wife. We're not sure why she is singled out as being identified as David's wife when the others are not. There is some speculation by commentators that perhaps there was another woman prominent at this time named Eglah, and there were so two women of the same name, and they basically added this text to make sure that you knew which one was being discussed. All right. So from there we move in. So go into the next section here. And it says, verse 6, and it came about while there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David that Abner was making himself strong in the house of Saul. Now Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, why have you gone into my father's concubine? Then Abner was very angry over the words of Ishbosheth and said, am I a dog's head that belongs to Judah? Today I show kindness to the house of Saul your father, to his brothers and his friends, and have not delivered you into the hands of David, and yet today you charge me with guilt concerning the woman. May God do so to Abner, and more so if, as the Lord has sworn to David, I do not accomplish this for him, to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and to establish the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan even to Beersheba. And he could no longer answer Abner a word because he was afraid of him. We see what happens here. This is Abner making a power play. Okay, Abner wants to either be the king, or he wants to be sort of the man who rules the king. In effect, he wants to be kind of that man behind the throne who's going to run the kingdom. And so Abner has gone in, has taken as I don't know, as wife, as concubine, maybe as mistress. I don't know exactly what the relationship is, but he has taken one of Saul's concubines, and Ishbosheth is outraged or offended by it because the king's concubines were essentially the private right of the crown, of the successor to the throne. To go into the king's concubine was essentially to claim the throne. And so Ishbosheth rightly is offended by that. And you notice that Abner doesn't deny doing it. Abner basically doesn't, he never said, I never did that. No, he doesn't say, I didn't do that. Apparently it was common knowledge that he had done that. Instead, he bristles up at Ishbosheth. What are you saying about me? That I don't deserve to this? That it's not right for me to do so? He says, am I a dog's head? Well, when he says that, we're not talking about canines here. We're not talking about dogs, the animal. A dog, in this terminology, was a male prostitute, a cult prostitute. We read that over in Deuteronomy. If you go over to Deuteronomy with me, Deuteronomy, the 23rd chapter, and verse 17 says, none of the daughters of Israel shall be cult prostitutes, nor shall any of the sons of Israel be a cult prostitute. You shall not bring the hire of a harlot or the wages of a dog into the house of the Lord your God for any votive offering, for both of those are an abomination to the Lord your God. So when he talks about, am I a dog's head, he's not talking about the animal. He's saying, what are you calling me? Are you accusing me of being some kind of a cult prostitute, a male prostitute? Are you suggesting I'm prostituting myself here for the house of Saul? It's the old adage that the best defense is a good offense. Here's Ishbosheth, who's come to Abner and accused him of, you went into my father's concubine, which is a right reserved for the heir to the throne. And Ishbosheth and Abner responds with this, essentially this moral outrage. What are you saying about me? What are you trying to accuse me of? Are you trying to accuse me of something like this, of becoming this prostitute? And it is clear. And Abner goes on to say, basically tells him, you wouldn't be king except for me. Yes, that's basically what he's saying here. That's what he's saying here in verse 8. Today I show kindness to the house of Saul your father, and to his brothers and his friends, and have not delivered you into the hands of David, and yet today you charge me with guilt concerning the woman. May God do so to Abner, and more so if by the Lord has sworn to David, I do not accomplish this for him, to transfer the kingdom of the house of Saul. It basically says, I set you up, Ishbosheth. I set you up as king. I was kind to you. I could have handed you over to David already. Notice how, notice the threat there. Basically, he's telling Ishbosheth, you got no power here. You got, you're king, but you're king because I told you to be king. You're not king out of your own power. You're king because I set you up. And that's, there is that implied threat there that, I made you and I can break you. And I will break you if you keep flapping your gums. I mean, that is really the implied threat there from Abner. And we find out that it's a very effective thing because in verse 11, he could no longer answer Abner a word because he was afraid of him. Why, yeah, I guess I would be afraid of him too. If here's this guy who's been the leader of my army, and suddenly he's threatening me, basically pointing out, hey, I made you king and I'll unmake you king if you keep talking, or I'll just hand you over to David, and we'll see what David wants to do with you. You can imagine that, yeah, that would kind of get his attention pretty well. So Abner here, though, Abner's in also something of a precarious position because he's, at the one hand, he's got David and Joab, hostile to him right across the Jordan. He's also got the Philistines, likewise hostile to him right across the river. Does he want a war on two fronts? Does he want to be fighting two enemies at the same time? The answer is, well, no, of course I don't want to be fighting two enemies at the same time. And if Ishbosheth is going to be blocking my ambition, maybe it's time to think about David. Maybe it's time to think about setting up something with David. And so Abner begins to think about, all right, what can I do to realign things here and set myself up with David? So, verse 12. Then Abner sent messengers to David in his place, saying, whose is the land? Make your covenant with me, and behold, my hand shall be with you to bring all Israel over to you. Basically, he's offering David the same arrangement he's had with Ishbosheth. I said Ishbosheth up as king. I'll set David up as king. I don't care. It's this idea of whose is the land. In other words, who does the kingdom belong to? And Abner's being fairly ambivalent about it. Ishbosheth, maybe. David, that works for me too. And so he's just going to go whichever way the wind happens to be blowing at that particular time. And David responds. David says, good, I will make a covenant with you, but I demand one thing of you, namely, you shall not see my face unless you first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come see me. So David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, give me my wife Michal, to whom I was betrothed for 100 foreskins of the Philistines. And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband, from Paltiel, the son of Laish. But her husband went with her, weeping as he went, and followed her as far as Bahurim. Then Abner said to him, go, return. So he returned. This is one of the more pathetic sights and images in the Old Testament, I believe. This is an incredibly sad and pathetic image here. David is demanding Michal's return. It's probably not that he, hey, I miss my wife. I've been married to her. I miss her. I want her back. They've been separated now for probably something on the order of 10 or 15 years, maybe something in that ballpark. They've been separated from each other. And as you recall what happened, Saul, wanting to basically declare David dead, had given her over to this other guy, this Patiel, had given her to him to be his wife. David wants her back. David wants her back, not likely not because he's in love with her, not because he's got all these fond memories of her, but because it's a political move. It solidifies his claim to the throne. Hey, look at this. I am son-in-law to the king, and therefore I have a legitimate claim. And so you're not going to see my face, he tells Abner, unless I get my wife back. Now, he's got to have known she's been sent off to be living with another man. Some of the, Regina? I would presume that, they would have known. They would have been known in that tribe that, yes, David is now our king. Which guy? Laish? Or Patiel? Pardon? Oh, Abner? Well, Abner was not of the tribe of Judah. Abner was of the tribe of Benjamin. No, David was of Judah. David's tribe of Judah. Yeah, David's of the tribe of Judah, but Abner is relative to Saul. They're all Benjamites. They're all of the tribe of Benjamin. And so, so they've got that going with each other. And so David wants his wife back. Some commentators suggest this is a violation of the law in doing this. We look at Deuteronomy 24. This thing becomes a huge mess. This becomes actually just a huge mess for everybody involved here, and it sort of shows us kind of the mess that we get into when we talk about divorce. Because this was Deuteronomy 24 verses 1-4. When a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that he finds no favor in his eyes because she has found some indecency in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, and she leaves his house and goes and becomes another man's wife. If the latter husband turns against her and writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, or if the latter husband dies who took her to be his wife, then the former husband who has sent her away is not allowed to take her again to be his wife, since she has been defiled, for that is an abomination before the Lord. Now, obviously, you could technically argue that David never sent her away. He never gave her a certificate of divorcement, and then her new husband never divorced her. But the idea here is that frankly, David doesn't have a right to have her back, given that she's been now given to another man as husband, as wife. There are certain things that men get into that can't get fixed by men. And this is one of them. We'll continue on with this next time. We'll pick this up again next time. We're out of time this morning. I appreciate your attention, but we'll discuss this some more next week. Thank you for your attention.